I was getting ready to say Jerome Ingram. He's a football player that I know. Jerome Pickett, who I've known for many more years than Jerome Ingram. Just want to invite and say thank you to everyone that's joining us today on the Cyversity Engage Impact interview out of Austin, Texas. Today, I'm talking with a good friend of mine, a longtime friend of mine. His name is Jerome Pickett. He happens to be the corporate global, I'm going to say all of this correct, the corporate global chief security officer for McDonald's. As I learned a couple of days ago from Jerome, the largest loyalty brand on the planet. So he'll actually give us some more information about that. I don't have control of my slides, so I just want to go through this. And the next slide will be Jerome Pickett there, an image of him. You can go to the next one. You can go to the next slide. Yep, there's Mr. Pickett. Next slide, if you will, please. Also, so this is Cyversity's mission, to achieve the consistent representation of women, traditionally underrepresented communities, and veterans, and do that in cybersecurity and through programs that are designed to diversify, educate, and empower. The reason we do that is because we know most of the individuals that are on the other ethical side, on the non-ethical side of cybersecurity, they come from varied backgrounds and have different varied approaches to compromising an environment. And so we think the same should be held for the folks on the ethical side. With that in mind, we know that talent matters. We know that diversity matters in the fight against to combat the evolving cybersecurity risks in the landscape. Next slide, Caroline, please. All right, so in 2024, actually in 2022, the organization became a paid membership. Students pay $20 a year. Professionals like myself and Jerome pay $100 a year. And for that, you can go to the next slide while I'm speaking through this. For that, there are an abundance, if you will, of benefits. Those benefits come in the form of mentorship, scholarships, chapters, low cost to no cost training, ambassadorship. Next slide as well, too, Caroline. These are the type of resources that are available. Obviously, we have events, networking events, and we know that networking is probably the key, if nothing else is. But if not as much as education, networking is probably one of the biggest benefits that are here at Cyversity and one of the biggest support tools. So a plethora of resources and tools available to our membership. And those are things that are totally beneficial to our membership. Next slide, Caroline. Right, so typically we have specific times of the month or the year that we highlight. This month, being October, is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. There are quite a few things that Cyversity of Austin, of Atlanta, of North Dallas, and a couple of other regions are doing. You should look at our website, and so you get an opportunity to look at some of the events that are going on in your area and join and look at some of the events and network with some of our colleagues. I'm going to ask you to pull away from the slides now, and I'm just going to go back to Jerome, Caroline, and we'll start the conversation. So Jerome, man,
Sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us on the Cyversity Impact interview series. I mean, you and I have known each other for literally over 4 decades. I was getting ready to say 40 decades. 4 decades. 4 decades. Neither one of us looked that old anyway. So yeah. 4 decades, and we've all watched you grow and develop. This is, as I just mentioned, Cyversity's Impact Interview Series. It's about, among other things, bringing to light the work, exploits, accomplishments of individuals who have made an impact in Cyversity's orb or universe, which happens to be cybersecurity. We get an opportunity to create this platform where you can speak to who you are, what you've done. And it's, while there's a fair amount of visibility there, it's also focused around, it also serves to motivate, and it also serves to encourage and activate and to inspire not only people like myself, but all of our colleagues who are in their journey as well. Hearing from someone like you who, one, has gone through many of the things that you've gone through, I won't say survived, but thrived through them and have become, successful. And we know that there's not every day is a shiny day. So I wanted to be able to, speak to that. For the sake of background, Jerome, right? I wanted to just ask you to just spend a little time talking about your background. We're both from New York. You're from Newburgh, which is kind of rural. And I'm from Brownsville, Brooklyn, which is very urban. And we've got somewhat similar backgrounds. But I wanted you to spend some time just talking about, where you're from. Sure. And talk about your people, if you will.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm really thrilled to join everyone. And David, thanks for asking me to participate. I'll give a little bit of my background, almost like the Reader's Digest version of my careers, but I'll start it, I think, with a little bit of grounding with where my drive and sort of like the foundational pieces of me that I think have contributed to everything else that I've been fortunate to do and be involved with. Grew up in Newburgh, New York. Most people probably don't know about Newburgh. It's a small-ish inner city, if you will, not like Brownsville, but for upstate New York, it's close enough. And I grew up in the city of Newburgh, which is it's just that it's really like a city setting. I went to a very large high school that I wore suits to school every day. It was almost like boys to men time where it was colorful, the red, the green silk suits and everything. I was an AP everything student, biology, physics and chemistry. And I was absolutely convinced since I was 7 years old that I was going to become an anesthesiologist. When I went to college, the one college I wanted to go to, I didn't get into. So I went to a college called Marist College that was near me, with a plan of only going there for a year and transferring to the school that I thought that I wanted to go to. While at Marist as a pre-med biology major, I hit for me, a substantial roadblock because I wasn't doing well in the classes that I thought I was going to be doing well in. I was used to A's and everything, but that wasn't happening in college for whatever the reason is. So I had to kind of figure out what I was going to do. I knew that, the doctor, the anesthesiologist path, well, I thought that the anesthesiologist path wasn't going to be the right path for me. I didn't really have anyone to give me good guidance on either pressing forward or any grounding on, hey, everyone that goes through this program is doing, does what you do. So I panicked, right? I had a little sort of existential freak out and I needed to find myself. And so I started thinking through other careers that I could potentially get into. I hadn't really had a plan outside of being a doctor. And criminal justice was an area that I had interest in, mild interest, medical law, both things that were interesting to me. So I went to go visit an advisor at my college and just get some advice and try to understand what the program was like. While I was meeting with this advisor, he asked me where I was from, and I told him I was from Newburgh. And the next thing he said really shook me, and it is the basis for everything that I do. I wasn't expecting what he said. What he said was, "Oh, Newburgh, oh, you weren't supposed to succeed anyway." And, for a kid who felt like they were failing in their course of studies and was just looking for positive advice and reinforcement, that's not what I got. Whether he meant it that way, the way that I took it, because growing up as an African American, I always had to prove myself. I would walk through stores and people would think I'm stealing everything. There was always, because I speak like I speak, I was always told that, I sound white, I don't sound like a black person. Like there are a lot of different things, right? So in high school, I dealt with almost a little bit of an identity battle where people assumed I was A, but I was B. And I didn't want to box myself into being the person everyone thought I should be. And so this comment about me I wasn't supposed to succeed really brought everything, like bubbled everything up. And for me, it sort of created this, I'm going to prove everybody wrong, this sort of chip on my shoulder. And so kind of fast forwarding a little bit, I completed my degree. I became a Secret Service agent. I spent 17 years in the U.S. Secret Service. Half of my career was abuses of technology. So it was network intrusions, computer frauds. It was identity theft over the internet. I did a bit of work with child enticement and child endangerment. There was also what was called at the time electronic surreptitious interception devices, or sort of corporate espionage, like bugs, cell phone cloning, and other things. So I started my criminal investigation career in abuses of technology. I spent about 5 years in the New York field office. I'm a 9/11 survivor. I was there in my building that day when the planes hit. And my next phase of my career was served on the Presidential Protective Detail. So I spent 4 years on George W. Bush's detail, and then I spent 4.5 years on Barack Obama's detail. I did everything that the detail offers, between driving the presidential limousines. I was a tactical team leader, so I was one of the sort of quote unquote SWAT guys. I was also the person wearing the suits and the little squigglies in your ear. I did it all. Stopped counting at 100 countries traveled. There was a time while I was still sort of on the Obama detail, my time was split. So 2 years of that was when he was first in office. Then I went back to the field and was leading a cyber task force, the Washington field office electronic crimes task force. So I became a computer forensic examiner. I was also one of the agents who conducted what was called critical systems protection. So anywhere that our protectees would go, we would look at networked infrastructure. We would look to see where vulnerabilities were that could impact their visit, and then we would mitigate those risks. So all total, 17 years. I decided to leave government early. I did not retire. I left after 17 years and became the chief security officer at the National Basketball Association. So now in the private sector, the NBA, my job was to protect people, places, and things again, but this time for entertainment instead of the most powerful, people in the world. So I grew the NBA's global security team. I brought online intelligence. I did a lot of integration with technology, more namely facial recognition and mobile passkey, a number of different things for access control, and also to help protect the games, because we had regular threats to run on a court or attack a player, or we had, as we took teams around the world, just protecting them. After 6 years, I spent 6 years in my role at the NBA. I decided to leave the security world, and I wanted to grow as an executive. So I went to a biometric identity company called Clear. I ran the sports and entertainment business. And essentially what that means is I grew and developed a P&L led, which means we're growing revenue to pay for our costs and everything. I built this team who was focused first on getting people back to events through COVID, with creating a way to verify digitally with a selfie that you've had vaccinations. That later transitioned into pairing your biometric identity with a ticket to get into a sports game, or to validate your age so you can buy a beer in your seat at the game without having to leave or pull out your wallet. So I deployed first of in the industry products around age verification with a selfie. While I was at Clear, there was a calling for me to take on caretaking for my dad. My family and I, living in New York, we relocated to Florida. I was both running the business at Clear and taking on full-time caretaking. We bought a house and moved my dad in with us. I ultimately ended up leaving Clear altogether, focusing on dad full-time. After he passed, I started sort of an entrepreneurial and where I opened up an advisory firm. I was advising in early growth stage tech, a lot of AI and Gen AI products. And now I'm at McDonald's. We decided that we wanted to move to the Midwest. McDonald's had an opportunity. Now I lead global security for McDonald's. Some of the other things that I've done outside of those careers, because again, I like to infuse the global security skill sets, the business-led sort of, businessman driving skills, as well as entrepreneurial. I'm an investor in companies. I've got several companies, early growth stage companies I invest in. I sit on advisory boards. I was a corporate board director for a private company that we IPO'd, brought it public, made a couple acquisitions, and then I was one of two board directors to negotiate a nearly $2 billion take private transaction. And now that company is owned by private equity. So there's just a lot of things. But I think the way I approach my job is I'm a person that pays attention to what everybody in the room is doing and what their jobs are. I want to learn it because I want to understand all the areas that I can bring value. So that's me in a nutshell.
That's more than a nutshell. And that was great. That was really great coverage, Jerome. Just amazing coverage. And you went through quite a few things. One thing I want to just go back to just briefly is this this interaction between yourself and this advisor.
Yeah.
What did that tell you? And we know how you reacted to it, but I'm sure there's a deeper, picture there as to why you reacted that way. And what has it done for you?
Yeah, I look at it as an African American, I always feel excluded. I have to fight for inclusion, right? And so this was my challenge in high school. Whenever people assumed I was A and I was really B, like I had to sort of fight for that space to prove that I was the person I am. And I think this interaction with the advisor only perpetuated that feeling that people always assumed probably not the best of you, or they put you in a box, right? Just because I'm a Black guy that came from Newburgh, that doesn't mean I was supposed to fail at life. So, for me, and even to today, despite the things that I've done, every conversation that I have, every conference room I walk into, every engagement that I have with someone, I'm proving who I am. I'm proving that I belong in the room. I'm proving that I'm a voice that perhaps you might want to listen to, but I'm always performing. And I think that's a byproduct of my younger years where I was always fighting to not be put into a box.
Right.
So some people might have reacted a much different way that was probably not as helpful. For me, it just made me want to prove everybody wrong.
Were you trying to prove this to yourself or to the world at large?
I was never a peer pressure person, and I still am not to today. Like, I think I wasn't trying to prove to myself, but I pick up on nonverbals very, I'm a criminal investigator, now I do it much better. But when you meet somebody for the first or second or third time, or when you raise your hand and want to say a point in a meeting, you see how people think about you or feel about you even before you open your mouth. Are they leaning in and oh yeah, or are they kind of rolling their eyes like this guy again? Like I think this is why I've many times in my life, in almost every engagement that I have, I ensure that my engagement is going to knock their socks off. It's exhausting. I am a extroverted introvert, which means I would rather be sitting on my sofa drinking a glass of wine by myself. But the roles that I have put me at the center of everything. I have to be on my game. I have to be energetic. I've got to be the first guy to talk and to sort of to encourage people to sort of live up to a standard. It's tiring, but it's what I have to do. And I think it's rooted in me proving that I belong.
Sure. Constantly raising your hand to solve the problem. I'm assuming that's part of the. So now today, we're going to jump around here because I had a whole list of questions, but you're your opening statements really put a lot of different things in context. Today, you're probably managing, well, you are managing a pretty large team. I mean, how are you transferring your life lessons or your professional lessons? How are you transferring that to them to help motivate them to do their particular specific objectives, if you will?
It's a good question. And I think as a leader, you have responsibilities to develop talent and not suck all of the air out of the room, right? Because if my voice is always the first voice, it drowns out other voices. It changes how everyone leans in because, this is what the boss thinks, so my opinion's not going to matter, right? You have to make space for voices. The voices should be diverse. I don't want a carbon copy of myself. I don't hire people that have my background, that do the things that I do, because I got me already solved for. I need to solve for people that have a much different entry point from how they think, or a much different lived experience. I found through my time at the NBA, Clear and here, as all of those were org building, where I came into a company that I thought was more mature, that wasn't, and I had to create the org and create the structure. What I found in doing that is the varied voices made us stronger. But the thing that was the most critical is the culture. You have to build a culture where voices are allowed, where you're meeting people where they are, where that the only time for you to contribute is just in that meeting, in those 30 minutes, where people just don't always, that's not always their best environment to contribute. So, we've been focusing with my team a lot on decision making and helping people understand, if you drew a line and that line is a continuum, it helps people understand where on that continuum, this is your neighborhood. Let's figure out the types of decisions that fit within your neighborhood. You fully own them. You don't need me to make them. I expect that you'll make them. If you need advice or if you want to bounce some ideas off of, happy to be here. But when you let people know the things that they own and where that they can make decisions, you start to have a team that is productive. They trust each other. They don't feel as though they're not contributing. They own their space. So, that's some of how I lead. There are 3 leadership principles that I have. First is assume positive intent. It is so easy, especially over text and email, to read something, to get the context wrong, to think that someone meant something that you read that wasn't there. Assume, if you start in a place where you're assuming positive intent, you're always going to end up engaging in a productive way. So that's the first one. The second one is root for each other. So I talk about culture and building, teams of people that want to work together. I mean, the whole concept of work is that you're spending a majority of your day at a place with people who aren't related to you or not your family, and you're supposed to do something productive, and then you go home exhausted, but you've given the best part of yourself at your job, right? It's so much better when you do that, when you want to be there, you feel like you belong. It's a great culture. So rooting for each other and celebrating other people's wins helps you get there. And then the last is fail forward.
Fail forward.
Right? Failing is okay. Failing is okay. I'll say it one more time. Failing is okay. I don't mind if my team fails, so long as they follow the right process and it resulted in a bad result. Guess what? That's a learning point, right? And very few people have reached any level of success, whether it's on a project, whether it's personally, professionally, without failing. So I embrace failing. I want, if my team's going to fail, I want them to fail fast, but I want them to fail forward. I want them to be open about it. Let's do a hot wash. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out what broke, right? So that's how I lead. And I think those 3 things have really helped build excellent cultures.
Wow. I've got so many questions, Jerome. Questions about the technology that you've deployed, the intersection between the intersection between your technology acumen as a practitioner and your business acumen as a businessman. There is a connection between the two. Where do they connect? How do they connect for you? And how do you gauge, or gauge is a good word, right? How do you gauge or get the success criteria out of that intersection? How do you do that?
So one, I'll talk about like the intersection, right? Because when I started in the Secret Service in 1997 and then was part of the New York Electronic Crime Task Force, electronic crimes, like in there wasn't really true cybersecurity at the time, right? But electronic crimes wasn't really much of a thing. It was sort of like something that was new, it was growing, and it wasn't the cool thing, right? Because the cool thing was getting out on the street, investigating counterfeit or doing credit card fraud or all the street crimes. So similar to how I grew up in high school, where I had to prove myself, like in the Electronic Crimes Task Force, all of the agents made fun of us. Like, hey, you guys are stealing people's video games and whatever, right? Fast forward to today, there is not a single thing in law enforcement or in many other places that doesn't touch on technology and electronics and other things, right? So it started with being a trailblazer in an area that isn't a strong discipline to now being the everything in everything that people do. In all of the roles, technology has played heavily in every single role I've ever had, full stop. Whether it was investigations, whether it was protection, whether it was at the NBA as I'm building a global security operations center, I'm trying to help arenas leverage facial recognition for anomaly detection and threat detection and patron screening, or whether it's at Clear where I'm using biometrics to make life better, or whether it's at, McDonald's where, we have 43,000 restaurants that we have to protect and we have to leverage technology for information advantage. It's in every aspect, right? So to say, there's a lot of speak about convergence with security. It's like the physical and the cyber. It's not a thing for me. It's all the same thing, right? Because you can't have one without the other. They're not mutually exclusive. So I think what does happen though is you have people with specialties. These are your cyber people. These are your physical security people. Sometimes they're the same. Many times they're not. But all the times they have to be, they have to work together, because the things that you're working on independently always vector back at some point to each other. So, I think what's made me a competitive candidate in all of the places that I've been in. I'm 47, so I've been in positions that I probably shouldn't have, and I've beat out people in government, in law enforcement that were well senior to me because of the skill sets that I had that they didn't have, because they were out on the street doing credit card fraud. I was learning the abuses of technology and how to deal with computers and everything else, and that was the key.
No doubt. What's interesting here is that in the world, in the industry, security industry, it's well known that the vaunted or valued positions are chief security officer. I mean, you've got that title, but it's a little bit over here to a degree. Chief technology officer, chief digital technology officer, chief information officer. I'm sure, and I'm waiting. I'm wanting to hear, how do you guys sort of get together and work on a challenge and a challenge that sort of is raising its head in the landscape? If there's an example that you can give that doesn't let out any secrets, please. If there's an example that you can give where you had to work in close collaboration with a CISO or a CTO to avert or to address a particular scenario, please share that with us.
Yeah. So here's an example. I mean, when I started at the NBA, there wasn't a cyber program there, right? There was a CIO, and then there was me, the CSO. And as we were starting to think about, bolstering the cyber capability, my boss asked me, should we put the cyber, functionality under you instead of the CIO? Because when you think about the roles, you have availability and then you have compliance, right? And
Right.
they kind of clash. You have a role that's focused on rolling out products for a company, making things easier to use. And then you have the sort of the role that's focused on, how are you gating this, like privileged access and all these things. They don't necessarily, jive. So the initial thought was, should we put the cyber capability that we're going to build under the global security, the physical security, and sort of do a converged thing? At the time, I said, I think that's the right place to do it, but I was so knee deep in building up the physical capabilities that I didn't want to distract myself and not be able to focus on what needed to be built from cyber. So ultimately what happened is the company hired a CTO and then hired a CISO under the CTO, and they built the whole cyber function there. We worked very closely together, both the CTO on larger big things that the league wanted to accomplish. Then it was the CISO on, okay, now that we know all this stuff is happening, let's work on how we investigate things, how we work insider threat and risk and other things. So then there was a really clear and easy collaboration. Even still now in my role, McDonald's just has the largest loyalty program, in the world. You have, 1% of the world's population eats there every day. Like there's just so many transactions and the systems are so big. So there's a lot of cyber layers. There's a lot of personnel that are doing different things on the technical or the cyber side. The physical side that I'm leading, I'm building capabilities, and we're figuring out where those ways of working are between our teams. It's not as mature as it was at the MBA when we built these things together, but we're now merging and we're finding those intersection points where we do our thing well. For me, in this moment, we manage crises. I'm building the process around how to manage, risk across the organization. And if you have, if a fair bit of your risk is happening in the cyber world, they're great at doing that. Let me build the structure to help do the other part of it. So we figure out where we can contribute to the problem. So that's, it's, I think in the roles that I've had, and many conversations take you to the convergence question and how do you work together, and like
Sure.
which of those do you work to, and
Sure.
CSO, is that really physical or is that cyber? It's an interesting question, because when I started at the MBA in 2014, anyone that was talking about a CSO was largely physical.
Right.
The pendulum started to swing where sort of the CSO discussion ended up being more cyber based, because boards were being forced to lean in on cyber protections. The SEC was starting to layer on like stronger notification and other things with breaches. So, I think now it really depends on the industry. But, I think, how these roles work together, they're not as far apart anymore as I think they were years ago.
Yeah, you just made 2 points, and you made 2 statements. One that I wanted to sort of go back to, and that has to do with boards, one, and then also the acumen that you utilize. Everybody seems to want to be a CISO or a CTO and the CIO. Not everybody's going to be one, and not everyone is probably suited, if you will, to be one. It's kind of a calling or select calling. Your acumen seems to be built around what's really important, the business. The business. When you said the word product, as an entrepreneur, I automatically thought of how I deal with it. I automatically thought of concept, product, delivery.
Right.
Right across the board. Everything in between is not blurry, not furry, but it's someone else's necessarily focus. So is that where you fit in this whole continuum as a business person with great communication skills? and great management skills. How do you see yourself?
Yeah, I like a unicorn, I guess you should say, because if you look at my career, it's not a straight line, right? I think many people think that you have a role and then you move up to a role and then you move up to another role and then now you're moving up again. And I think, today's generation thinks that those moves should happen every year, every 2 years, right? But my career has been sort of, it doesn't not make sense, but it's not linear. And
Yes,
I have
right.
focused more on, I describe myself as just having the love of the game. What does that mean? It means I love learning, whether it's educational, whether it's in a company and understanding various aspects of the business. Most people are heads down and focused on their job, and they're sort of shooting and in that tunnel. I'm not in the tunnel. I'm connective tissue. I permeate the companies that I'm in because my job is to figure out where I can add value and de-risk things, right? So that's how I look at my job. And the only way to do that is to really engage with business leaders across the business, understand how they think, what do they value, what are their priorities, what are the big problems that they're solving, how are they prioritizing? And then you got to take all that stuff back and figure out for your program, how does that fit into all those other things, right? Because if you're not marching to the same sheet of music as the company, the revenue drivers and the other things that make the company grow, you're not going to succeed. I think the part of the CISO roles and some of those roles are super challenging because all you're doing is managing risk, and at some point, it's not going to work, right? At some point, you're going to do everything right. Same in physical security, and same in the Secret Service, right? You have to be 100% all the time. Bad guy needs to be lucky once. That just means like you see a lot of movement in the market. You see people that are in roles for 2 or 3 years or so, and then they move on to other roles. It's not because they're toxic, and it's not because the companies are bad. It's just these are hard roles, and they're big problems to solve. And if you're not adept at infusing what you're doing with where the business is going, then you're not going to be. It's going to be more challenging to be successful.
Man, I love how you responded to that, Jerome. That is great because it really, when you hear about CISOs and CTOs constantly moving, it's not necessarily because they failed. I may have accomplished my mission, and now I'm moving to another mission. You could take for what you've done between NBA and Clear and now at McDonald's, you could take that as your stepping stone because I saw how you moved them, but it moved it up either way. You were still moving them up the channel. So,
Yeah.
when you look at what you're doing, how are you engaging with boards of directors? Because at the end of the day, beginning of the day and end of the day, therein lies the rubber and the road. I mean, the decisions that have to be made at the board level, they end up reflecting probably the dollar value of the organization as a whole. And of course, you have to take that information that you've gotten from the board and cascade that to your direct report so that they can activate those initiatives. How are you engaging with the board? Is it through some autonomous piece of software? Are you directly engaging with them? Are they understanding? Are they understanding what you're seeing as a reality of the business?
Yeah. So it's a good question, and it's different by company, right? In my current role, I don't directly, other than the protective function that we roll that my team manages, I don't directly, work with the board on anything. However, there are things that I'm doing is represented at the board level. There's risk to employees. We have top tier company risks that we're managing. I lead one of them, right? So there are things that I certainly do, present to the board. I think with boards, one of the advantages I have is I've been a board director, so I understand how board directors think and how they lean in with executives. When I was in the role at the NBA, I was sort of there through and did have a lot of board engagement at the NBA. I was the head of security through a time when there were a lot of terror attacks happening across the globe, and we were trying to make sure that we had the right process in place to protect the business. You know, when you're a live sport and entertainment on location business, making sure that people come is the business, and you have to sort of develop all the right strategies to do that. And I did have more engagement there. I think at the end of the day, regardless of the level you are in a company, the question that you have to ask or understand, maybe it's more you understanding this, is like, where are the big rocks? What are the big problems to solve? And that's always the question. Like, it's not, hey, what am I doing today? It's what's the problem to solve? And if you understand within your function what big problems your function is solving, and then you understand how that rolls up to the organization, like what's the organization solving, and then, I think you will solve for much of what a board would lean into, because, depending on where you are in the organization, you will never see the board. But I think if you understand the company's business, if you're reading your 10Ks or your quarterly, like, I would be curious how many people that are watching this that work at a company are reading your filings that list the strategy, and it lists where like investment is going and all the things. Like, this is the roadmap. That's how you get close to the things that the board is engaged, and that's how you get close to the things that your key executives care about.
That's right. If I'm going to read a 10K when SEC filing, it's going to be a Sunday, because any other time it's going to be any other time. So, firstly, before I go on to any other questions, I know we're coming up on time, and I wondered if anyone else in the audience has a question. Type it into the chat so we can ask Jerome that question. Happy to take any questions that you have, and any ones that you can't answer. He can answer, he just won't. Also, Caroline, if you don't mind putting Jerome's and my LinkedIn, our LinkedIn's in the chat so people can see that, and they can contact either him or I if they need to. Jerome, I mean, in most cases, most of us have a sponsor or a mentor or someone who has guided us through our journey. Did you select any mentors, or did anyone select you, or and this may be a tough question, but did you select any mentors, anyone select you, and sponsors? Because sponsors are the people that speak for you when you're not there.
I've had, so I talked about earlier on in my career where I didn't have any good guidance. Like, I think I learned to figure it out. I mean, I think the thing with mentors and how people think about and leverage mentors, it's all about you, right? And usually that doesn't last very long. I think any mentoring relationship should be mutually beneficial. It should be, I'm learning from you, but hey, you're also learning, like that person's learning from you as well. I think, I was lucky when I was at Marist College. This is after this incident happened where I was told I wasn't going to succeed. One of the really critical people that ended up like serving in a mentor role for me was the president of the college. Like, it doesn't get any bigger than that, right? The president of the college ended up, he looked out for me. He saw something in me. I don't know what he saw, but he saw something in me. He would invite me to events with other faculty and students, and he would ensure I knew about different events that was happening so I can go. He was interested in what I wanted to do as a career. Then he would introduce me to people that perhaps may be able to help on an internship or something else, right? So from that experience, I do this now frequently. I like to pay forward the things that I've experienced, and I think everyone should. I have many people that I loosely mentor, whether it is government, like law enforcement folks in government that are looking at trying to break into the private sector. I have helped now 36 federal agents become gainfully employed in the private sector. I'm frequently doing a number of my roadshow conversations to talk about the process and talk about how to be successful and talk about how to build a 30, 60, 90-day plan. I invested in a an executive coach when I was working at the NBA. Most people don't invest in themselves in this way. So I had a person that was my professional therapist, if you will. If I had an issue, if I needed to understand how to talk to a budgeting team, or if I like interviewing, this is what this person was for. So that was really helpful. And now, as part of my officer executive goals at my current company, I sought out some high potential people in the company that I now mentor on a regular cadence as well. So, I think that there's a difference between mentorship and allyship and sponsorship. Like, you should understand those different things, because if you want to progress through a career, it's not a mentor a mentor can help you get there, but it's your sponsors and your allies that are not within your business function, both inside and outside the company, that are going to help you do that, because they pull on the strings of the people who have the ability to promote you.
Right.
When you have external validation, internal validation, and validation outside of your reporting line, but still in the company, it's super powerful.
Right. To that end, there's a question in the chat that comes from, it's Sybil. She's out in California. Is networking the best way to find a mentor and or a sponsor? How do you best nurture those relationships mutually?
Yeah. So I think, let me talk about networking for a moment. I think most people think of networking as finding someone on LinkedIn or something, or shaking someone's hand and asking, hey, can I call you from time to time? That's kind of networking. I think that the key with networking is leaving an impression with someone where that they want to come back and think of you, right? The best way to do that, and it's super easy, and no one ever thinks about doing this. Like, when you meet somebody and you have a conversation, you can start to gather some information. Family members, wife, kids, what have you, birthday, and start keeping a file of the people that you meet. I mean, not Satya Nadella does this. He keeps on a daily basis. He keeps a note of what did he learn, who did he meet, and if you start doing that and start programming in your calendar that you're going to just proactively outreach to someone, you're not asking them for something, you're just wishing them a happy birthday. Hey, I met you at this. I just wanted to wish you a happy birthday. I guarantee you that person will remember you and will think about you. And that helps that relationship become a relationship. The problem with mentorship is that most people treat it as a one-way function, where I want something from you. Do you have time? It can't be a one-way function. It's got to be mutually beneficial. A mentor there's got to be something in it for the mentor. This could be learning something new. This could be expanding a network. This could be a number of things. But there are techniques to networking that most people don't do. And it really goes back to it goes back to the person that you're meeting feeling as though you've heard them, you see them, you remember things about them that's personal, and you're developing a friendship that then develops into an advice gathering opportunity on either end. That's how those type of relationships work really well. So networking, I just gave you a big key to networking. Mentorship, don't just ask. It can't be just asking. I need your time. I need your advice. I need you to introduce me. Like, that gets tired really fast.
Wow. That's stark reality.
It's straight reality.
Absolutely, Jerome. Absolutely. Next question comes from Sophia, and that was going to be my question. Do you have any coach recommendations? I know
this is what I
yeah.
recommend. A coach is like a therapist, right? There are lots of companies out there, and you can search them, and you should be interviewing people. You need to have chemistry, right? I think in whatever your career focus is, you should find someone that has done that thing well and is offering their advice for people, right? It's going to be paid advice. You're going to have a relationship there, but you want to find someone who has been successful at the thing you're interested in. You got to have chemistry. You want to interview them. You should never pay for a consultation, right? These things are free. They need to build the value for you, for them to sell the business to you, and you want to have someone that you feel like you can learn and it can help level you up, right? So that's it's a personal thing. There are lots of companies, big and small, that offer executive coaching or other type of coaching services. That's how you should approach that.
Sure. Jerome, where are you going? I mean, you've been to a lot of places. Where are you going to be? Where are you going to be when you grow up?
Love of the
So,
game. I
yeah,
do what's fun. And so the job that I have now, I'm not working it because I need it. I'm working it because it's fun to do.
sure.
And when it's no longer fun to do, I no longer do it. Right. And then I move on to the next fun to do. There could be 3 fun to do's, or I can just focus on what seems to be one of the funnest things in my life, which is watching my little guy grow up and experience everything.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So I look at the types of things that I get involved in. The way that I decide what makes sense is the culture great there? Is this going to enable me to have flexibility to be able to do the things outside of work that is with my family? I see one person made a comment about when I left and did caretaking for my dad and left a career. And I'll say this, the most fulfilling thing I did was leave everything for dad. That was the most fulfilling thing. And I think after he passed, it wasn't as much that this was full of sorrow. It was more a mission accomplished, right? And going through my careers, whether it was the Secret Service, MBA, I missed everything. I missed holidays. I missed birthdays. I'm always on the phone. I'm always unavailable. I'm always managing something. And to, for once, do something that wasn't focused on work and that was focused on humanity, it was amazing. So if anyone has the opportunity to do things that, like, you get one shot at life. I saw this quote somewhere. Life is like you have a beginning date and an end date and a dash in the middle. And life is all about how you spend time on the dash, right? It can't be all grind, or else what are you doing?
It's all grind at that point. Right? It's wow. Jerome, last question to you. Well, firstly, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask any of us in the audience, myself included? Is there any question that you would ask of us if you had an opportunity just to ask one question to all of us? What would that question be?
I really hope this question makes everyone laugh, but are you all seeing this fly that keeps buzzing by my head that I'm trying for the life of me not to swat away?
It's the humanity part of you that we were talking about.
Did I play it off well? This thing is bugging me, man. It's flying around, and I'm just kind of like, focus, focus, focus.
It's the humanity piece.
Yep.
Sorry, I got a call coming in there. Let me just swat that for a minute. There you go. Hey, so, any parting words for our audience? And you know that our audience, Jerome, is made up of individuals who are going through their cybersecurity journey, or their journey, because now we're clear that it's not all about technology. It's about the business. It's about how the application of these technologies to business. You could be anything you want. You could lead from anywhere you want. The last time we talked, we were talking about Gail Evans, who is now the Chief Digital Transformation Officer for Disney. She started as the janitor, right? As the janitor for Keystone, or for a large camera company. So what would you be saying to any one of us about our journey, where we are and where we're going?
Yeah, what I would say is under promise, over deliver, and don't ever say no to an opportunity, right? My career started at a photocopier. As an intern, I spent 80% of my time in the Secret Service making photocopies. And every day I showed up and I treated it like I was going to be the best photocopier that there ever was. I would put on music. I'd start jamming. I was just making a contest of it myself. And what happened was people saw that the most menial of menial tasks, I attacked it and didn't treat like it was beneath me, right? I think you are always interviewing, regardless of where you are, what you're doing. If you're around someone else, you're always interviewing. You always have to be on, right? And it's the things that you're doing when no one's looking that matter the most. So what I would say is, don't think that any role is beneath you. Don't be afraid to take a step back, to take 3 steps forward. Don't be afraid to lateral and get into another role because you need to develop a whole new skill set. Don't be afraid to go back to school. Don't limit yourself. I think life is just a whole sum of experiences. And so the more experiences that you have, the more tools you have in the toolbox. If you have a bad boss, do the things that you like that the bad boss has, and throw everything else. Say, I'll never do those things when I'm in this position, right? That's how you win. You win at finding all the things that are going to make you better.
Right. One last question came into the chat, and we'll make this. We've got about 4 minutes, so you've got a timeline for this one as well.
Right.
As someone in a non-technical position within the United States government, I've touched areas in the cybersecurity space, but more on the administrative side. How can I navigate that arena to gain more expertise that would make me more marketable for entry-level cybersecurity positions outside of the admin support? How does someone in administrative duties market themselves to be more proficient as a practitioner, cybersecurity practitioner, or any kind of practitioner?
It's an interesting question because so far my experience in many companies is that the people, like the voices in the roles that are the hardest to promote out of and sort of be taken seriously as a value add to the business, are administrative roles, because you're serving people, you're helping sort of with projects. I think what I would say is that, in the administrative roles, what you become adept at is learning who the right people are in a company and what the right processes are to get things done. I think the more that you can focus on developing those skills, then you have to find a role, whether it be like a project management role, or it can be an alignment role where you perhaps become a chief of staff or something else. Like, you take those superpowers of understanding how to bring people together and get things done and who the right people are. You know, sort of the politics of the office. Use those superpowers to then move into a role where you're managing multiple streams of things, like a project manager. Like, absolutely. I think those are great. That's a great step into that next area. And once you get there, then you can sort of recreate where you want to go. Like that would be my view.
And don't forget, Lauren, raise your hand for every challenge. Mm-hmm. Raise your hand, because problem solvers, those are the ones that rise to the top. Solving problems is a key element in business. Jerome, first of all, since the last time we've chatted, which was like a couple of days ago, but even before that, man, so happy to have you here.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone having me.
Appreciate you coming, sharing, and as we were talking about being servant leaders, it's part of the background, but also, there you just tried to get rid of the fly just then.
Yeah, so, it buzzed in my ear. I can't get past that.
Thank you again for your time, and I appreciate you being with us. And I don't know what else to say, but thanks very much, and love to you and your family, and we'll see each other again soon.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.